तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. So we welcome all the devotees to this small class. Usually we discuss Bhagavad Gita verse by verse, and we are about to complete the 8th chapter. And tomorrow is Sri Bhagavad Gita Jayanti, the most auspicious day on which Lord Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita to his dearmost friend Arjun. And to commemorate that, we have just a small presentation, some small thoughts that I'm sharing with all of you of its relevance in current times. All of you must have come across a first aid kit. First aid kit is something that people usually have at their homes, and just in case there is a minor bruise, there is a small cut or something, then this is that first aid kit that comes into a rescue. Sometimes if somebody has some blood pressure kind of a history, hypertension, then they have some other medicines that are always available at their homes. If you have old people at your homes, then some other medicines need to be kept. And similarly, so not that when we have those medicines at our home, we expect something to happen. Our expectation is that nothing should happen, nothing should go wrong, but still, in anticipation, just in case something happens, we always have those medicines at home. Similarly, although the Bhagavad Gita was originally spoken by Lord Krishna to Arjun, and it's a really amazing situation where one of the strongest warriors, not just on the bodily level, intellectually, he's very intelligent, he's very smart, he's very flexible. Just some time back, we were discussing with a devotee, and he's a zoology student. He's done his master's in zoology, and in one college, I just asked him, "What are you teaching?" He told me he's teaching botany. And then I asked him, "How come you're teaching botany?" But he said, "Actually, there's nobody to teach botany in this college. And although I'm a zoology majors, but still they told me, we have somebody to teach zoology, but we don't have anybody to teach botany. Can you teach botany?" And he's just shifted his subject from zoology to botany. Last 3 years, he's been a successful teacher teaching botany. And I told him, "You're amazing. Not that what you want to do is right, not that what you are trained to do is what you want to do, but you want to do what is the need of the hour, what is necessary that you want to do." And this flexibility is something which is a very big plus point. So Arjun is also somebody who is really flexible. Why? Because during Agyatavas, Arjun, he played the role of a dance teacher. And I was just thinking, somebody, in that Virat Yuddha, when all the Kauravas, they came to Virat Desh and they tried to steal away all the cows. And then Uttar Kumar and Brihanalla, the other version of Arjun, they come face to face. And then Arjun takes the Gandiva bow and all that. And then the thread of that bow is tied by Arjun. So, one interesting thing about all these Kshatriyas, we read about all these warriors, we call them warriors, and sometimes it is important to translate those Sanskrit words into English. But one interesting thing is, the warriors in Vedic culture, we always hear that when there was a war, then they took their bow, they took that rope, and they tied it around the bow, and then they pulled a string. So I always had this question, why did they not tie the rope of the bow before? Why do they have to do it there? So recently I came across this concept that when you have a ready bow with you and you have arrows with you, there is a tendency in you to create some violence. Just like somebody who has a ready gun and there are bullets already loaded, there is a tendency that he'll use that gun unnecessarily. So all these Kshatriyas, they were trained not that you are skilled and not that you have a bow and not that you have some arrows you start shooting around. You always keep the bow without the rope. The bow should never be on the rope. Only when there is a difficult situation, then you tie the rope to the bow and then you start shooting arrows only for the right purpose. And that's why I was mentioning how warriors cannot be really equated with Kshatriyas, because Kshatriyas, they were principled warriors. They were not warriors for no good reason. So here is Arjun on one side, he's such a principled person that he ties the rope to his bow only when there is a need. He does not do it unnecessarily. And this same warrior who is so principled, who is so self controlled, at one point of time was putting flowers in the hair of Uttara, his dance student. So here is somebody who is very powerful physically. Here is somebody who is intellectually very intelligent. He's very flexible. He's also very sensitive, and he's very committed to his mother's instructions. When he won Draupadi and came to his mother, and mother said, "Whatever you have brought, you divide it amongst the five brothers." He did it. There was no resistance. So such an amazing person. He's an emblem of success. He's an emblem of popularity. He's an emblem of physical strength. He's an emblem of character. He's an emblem of sensitivity. He's an emblem of intelligence. He's an emblem of everything that we are all aspiring for. And imagine the situation that in the most important battle of his life, this is basically the peak of all the different events that have happened in his life. And he is face to face with that army and he becomes weak. He becomes weak. He is not able to understand what is right and what is wrong. And you know what is the most interesting thing? The most interesting thing is when such a powerful person becomes weak, he does not hide it. This is one way how you can understand the strength of Arjun. The strength of Arjun is in fighting wars, strength of Arjun is in sensitivity, his flexibility, and all that. But another way to define Arjuna's strength is in spite of all his strength, in spite of all his plus points, one day when he felt weakness, he did not find it necessary to hide that weakness. He did not feel it appropriate to fake his confidence. So many times we have come across really powerful people, really strong people, and the way life goes, if there is success after success, if they have always been very popular, if they have always been very much glorified, and one day, if they are unable to come up with some solution, it becomes very, very difficult for them to accept. I have been intelligent all my life. I have been strong all my life. But in this situation, I am helpless. So, this is what really amazes me about Arjun. He has everything, and on top of it, he also has this humility that when he is confused, he does not fake his confidence and he really approaches with all humility to his dearmost friend Krishna and tells him, "You know what, till now we were friends, but I want to change that relationship. From today onwards, I will be your disciple and you will be my spiritual master, you will be my guru. Please, please, please instruct me." So, that kind of eagerness to learn, that kind of eagerness to submit and take good advice and overcome the difficulty, this kind of humility is really very special for Arjun. So here we have somebody who's a very powerful warrior and everything else, but now his strength is not his physical power or his mental power or his spiritual power. In this position, his strength is his humility. Yes, I am confused. Yes, I want to learn more. And I feel from this picture, we can just see how Krishna is so very sensitively guiding Arjun and then bringing him out of that whole ocean of warriors. There are big sharks in that ocean of warriors. There are these big huge fish. There are crocodiles in that big ocean of warriors. But Krishna very successfully takes Arjun inside this ocean, makes him swim that ocean, makes him kill all those sharks and crocodiles and everything else, and then brings him out successfully. So, one thing that we can learn from Arjun in this moment is that we could be very intelligent all our life, we could be very sensitive all our life, we could be really very popular all our life. But in a moment of crisis, the first thing that we can do is to accept, yes, in this moment, I may not be able to gather all my intelligence that I have shared with so many of my friends and so many of my relatives and so many of my near and dear ones all my life. In this moment, I myself need some guidance, I myself need some advice. So that's why relevance in current times, I felt we should begin with this, that we will also be faced with similar situations where we are helpless and we could learn from Arjun. And I have these key concepts, and I chose to speak on these few concepts because these are the concepts from where Lord Krishna starts speaking the Gita. Yes, Krishna has spoken about Karma Yoga in the third chapter, Jnana Yoga in the fourth chapter, sixth chapter he speaks about Dhyana Yoga, and in the 12th chapter he speaks about Bhakti Yoga. Sometimes he speaks about Buddhi Yoga in the end of the second chapter. But something that is interesting is when he begins the Gita, he actually makes a very strong start. He does not begin in a very softy kind of a way. The first words, 2.10 is where Krishna is mentioned as he is smiling. When Arjun submitted to him, when Arjun asked him those questions, please help me, please guide me, then 2.10 mentions that he smiled. And then 2.11 onwards, Krishna starts speaking. So we are just taking the first five shlokas. And I want to present how Lord Krishna, right in the beginning, he is making a very, very courageous start. Some of us who are speakers may not make such kind of courageous starts, but Krishna is really interesting. And then to catch the basic mood of that particular shloka, of that particular translation, I also put a line that will probably stay in our mind because of the rhyming of the words. So 2.11 is the concept of the shloka is those who are wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead. This is from Prabhupada's translation. And the concept that is being spoken by Krishna there is don't cry lest you become dry. Instead, try till you catch God's eye. So, one disease that afflicts all of us in our lives at different situations is that we lament. We engage in something which is called in Sanskrit as shoka. Oh, why did this happen with me? Oh, why did this person do this with me? Oh, why did the situation become like this? And we just keep on crying, we keep on blaming, we keep on mourning, and we are just not ready to really accept the responsibility that yes, there are certain situations that led to the present crisis, but maybe I also played a small role. You know what is the role that we played in that crisis? We accepted the crisis. We embraced the crisis. When life threw a crisis at us, when people threw a crisis at us, we happily accepted that crisis. That is the minimum role that all of us have played in that. What if we put up a brave front, like a warrior, like Arjun, and we are trying to make the Bhagavad Gita relevant to our current times? So there is a crisis, there is an economic crisis, there is a health crisis, so many crises, but we won't embrace the crisis, we'll do something about it. And so repeatedly in the Gita, Krishna will say, don't lament, Arjun, don't keep on crying, get up, fight. So many times, tato yuddhaya yujjasva, get up and fight, do something about it, don't sit down and don't keep crying. So it is mentioned in the scriptures, jivera swarupa hoye krishnera nitya das, that what is our original constitutional position? Our original constitution position, as per Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is Lord Krishna himself in the mood of Srimati Radharani, is that we are all servants. And catching this theme of servants, what does a servant do? Does a servant keep crying about the situation? Imagine there is a rich man's home and there is a servant, and the rich man says, I want some milk sweet today, right now, for dinner. And then he says, but we don't have any milk. And the shop where milk is sold, it's closed now. And he just keeps giving different reasons. Basically, he'll get fired. He's not a good servant. So if Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is telling us, Jivera Swarupa Hoy Krishnara Nitya Das, we have to take this as an indication that we have to become active. We have to come up with different options for seva. Oh, if this option is not working, let me try out this option. If this is not working, let me try out this. And in this way, we have to understand that we have to be constantly active. In life, if we are not active on the physical platform, you will see that we are active on the mental platform. Somebody who's sitting quietly in some corner, but he's not sitting quietly. Actually, he's making some plans. He's having some thoughts. And those who are mentally active, they may not look to be physically active, but basically because of the nature of the soul that he is always active. Nahi kaschit kshanam api jato tishtati akarmagre. Third chapter, Krishna says, there is not a single moment, O Arjun, which is without activity. So all of us need some space. All of us need some opportunity. All of us need some some situation where we need to express our activity either through the body or through the mind or through the intelligence. Think about it. I have seen devotees who are book distributors. I have seen devotees who like to preach, who like to share Lord Krishna's message with others. And you know what I've seen? My observation is such people are very jovial people. Such people are very nice people. Just by book distribution, how do you become jovial? Just by engaging in preaching, how do you become a nice person? You know why? Because preaching is basically trying to tell people how to love Krishna. And when you're teaching people how to love Krishna, when you're teaching people how not to get caught up in all the day-to-day affairs that are always miserable, always trying to create some friction in our lives, basically it rubs off on you. When you are trying to distribute books, it is basically trying to tell people, see, this is one thing that is missing from you. You have money, you have success, you have health, you have popularity, you have everything. But what is the cherry on the top of the cake is this wisdom from Lord Krishna. And it's not an easy thing to share this message with others. So it is basically a kind of a fight, or it is basically a type of a struggle that we do with people's consciousness. The preacher's consciousness is on one side, and those to whom he's preaching, their collective consciousness is on the other side. And the preacher is speaking, he's presenting the thoughts, he's presenting his message based on Krishna's message in the Gita. And on the other side, if there is strong resistance, basically you can see this as a war. So the preacher represents Arjun, and there are so many thoughts that are being thrown at the preacher. No, 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 this is not the right way to lead life. Surrender to Krishna and chanting Krishna's names on a everyday basis and taking shelter of the Gita. We never learned this in our school. We never learned this in our college. In our office also nobody speaks like this. So basically it's a war. And so preacher in one sense is engaged in a war, trying to convince people that yes, what you're saying is true, but this is a higher perspective of life. When you want satisfaction in your life, you need the Gita. When you want happiness in your life, you need money. But if you want long-term happiness, if you want deep, fulfilling happiness in your life, then you need the Gita. So the book distributors, the preachers, or those who are engaged in some of these activities are jovial. You know why? Because all of their energy is spent in fighting against Maya. Their energy is spent in fighting against illusion. And so they don't have any energy left to fight with people around them. There's no energy left. You have to think so much, and then you have to come up with the right words, and you have to come up with the right concepts. So much energy is spent. When people around you oppose you, you say, okay, no problem. You are right. Probably I'm wrong. But those of us who find it difficult to preach, who find it difficult to distribute books, who find it difficult to represent Krishna and fight with the external energy, fight with the illusory energy, we have so much energy left within us, and many of the times, unfortunately, that energy comes out in the form of fighting, blaming, cursing, and coming up with unlimited complaints against people around us, against our family members, against our relatives, sometimes against devotees also. And the peak of it all is complaints against Krishna. Oh, why did Krishna do this? I heard in a Gita class that Krishna is in control, and if this happened, even when Krishna is in control, then I think Krishna is to blame. So, the way Krishna teaches us to have engagement in positivity as a very positive alternative, as a very nice alternative to, to getting sucked by negativity. Krishna does not teach us to fight negativity. That's a very lower level of doing it, and that's where all these motivational videos and motivational talks come. Motivational videos are try to create some positivity inside you to fight the negativity. But Lord Krishna is not talking about that kind of a rebuttal to negativity. Lord Krishna is saying, engage yourself in positivity so much, exhaust yourself in representing positivity so much that you don't have any energy left to embrace the negativity. You don't have any energy left to actually accept the negativity in your own heart. So, this is the option that Krishna is presenting. In the 18th chapter, Lord Krishna says, if you don't follow my instructions, O Arjun, this is at the end of the Gita, he says, you know what? Your basic nature is of fighting, and you are anyways going to fight. Anyways, you're going to fight, better fight for me. So, 18.6 is Krishna says, Sarvadharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja. Give up all your concepts. What is right, what is wrong, what is dharma, what is adharma, and just surrender to me. Just do what I'm telling you to do. And the most interesting thing is, when somebody tells us, just abandon all your concepts and do what I want you to do, we would feel probably now he would want me to do something really outrageous. Probably now he would want me to do something that I've never done in my life. And now that's why he's demanding this kind of a submission. Just do what I tell you to do. And the most interesting thing is, after Arjun agrees to this, after Arjun says, yes, Krishna, I will do what you want me to do. Karishye vachanam tava. What does Krishna ask him to do? Arjun has been a warrior his whole life, but Krishna does not ask him to pick up a plow. Arjun has been a warrior his whole life, but Krishna does not ask him to play a flute. He says, oh, flute is my favorite instrument and I want you to be a flutist. Nothing like that. So Krishna demands that kind of a surrender, and when Arjun submits to that demand, it's very interesting that Krishna does not want him to change his actions. Krishna does not ask him to pick up another profession. Krishna says, continue fighting. I was just checking. Are you really willing to surrender to me? And if you're really willing to surrender to me, which you say you are, then you know what I want from you? I want a change of your consciousness. I don't want you to sit down. Now that you are a big warrior and now that you told me that I will surrender to you, I don't want you to change externally. I want you to remain active. I want you to be really very strong. I want you to do whatever you have done till now. But the change that I want is not that of inactivity over activity. What I want is that you do it in a spirit of service rather than in a spirit of selfish, arrogant ownership. So, although Krishna says, surrender unto me, but he does not want Arjun to change his externals. What he wants Arjun to change is his consciousness. So, if we don't engage in activities for the pleasure of Krishna, for the service of Krishna, and if we feel spirituality is stopping our activities, if we feel spirituality is about becoming dumb, if we feel spirituality is about becoming blind, if we feel spirituality is about becoming deaf, then we lost it. Then we didn't understand Krishna's instructions in the Gita. We have to become super active. We have to become super energetic. We can't sit down and cry. We can't sit down and blame. We have to get up. We have to fight. We have to fight not for ourselves, but which we have done our whole lives. Now we have to get up and we have to fight for Krishna. In big companies, when they have a problem with somebody, maybe some employee, and they want to make him redundant, they want to throw him out. In some of these companies, you can't just throw people out. So what they do is they make them inactive. They take away all their work. So in the whole chain of hierarchy, there is some work allotted to their superiors, there is some work allotted to them, and there is some work that is allotted to their juniors. What these big time bosses, what they will do is, somehow all the work is done either by their superiors or by their juniors, and on their table, on their desk, there is no work to do. So the most intelligent people, they need some outlet for their creativity, they need some outlet for their knowledge and their skills. So what happens is, when you become redundant, when all your work is being done by somebody else, you kill that person inside. So, my dear friends, Krishna is teaching us, please keep trying, please become active, please become energetic, and don't die internally. And please encourage everyone else around you to become active and energetic and serve Krishna with whatever they have. You can dance for Krishna, paint for Krishna, speak for Krishna, sing for Krishna, whatever you want to do, cook for Krishna. But please do it with a service attitude, and that will be genuine spirituality. In the 18th chapter, Krishna also says, those who study this sacred conversation of ours worship me with their intelligence. So Krishna is giving a different perspective to worship. We always thought worship is done with deepa, we always thought worship is done with dhupa. But Krishna is saying, here you can use your intelligence to worship me. So Krishna is such a broad-minded person. With your body, you can worship me. With your hands, you can worship me. And you can also worship me with your intelligence. In this kind of worship of the Gita, with your intelligence, worship of Krishna with your intelligence, you don't need agarbatti, you don't need some lamp or something. But Krishna is saying, please don't leave any part of your existence, your body, your mind, your intelligence, your ego. Please don't leave it unconnected to me. Use your intelligence to worship me, use your mind to worship me, use your ego to worship me, and so on. And one thing about Krishna is, if we try, Krishna really appreciates the smallest effort that we do for him. And that's why only the hopeless can lament, and only the atheists can be hopeless. Somebody who has a little bit faith in Krishna can never be hopeless. And because they are never hopeless, they can never lament and they can never cry. Yes, one lamentation that is allowed in the life of a devotee is, I am not able to serve Krishna enough. I have so much time, I have so much energy, but I have not been able to really give justice to Krishna's kindness in my life. One of the reasons why the son of Vyasa Rishi, the speaker of Srimad Bhagavatam, Shukdev Goswami, he was not really ready to come out of the womb of his mother for around 13 years, is that he was feeling this world is a world of illusion. This world is not a good world. I'll get lost here. But Vyasa Rishi told two of his disciples to sing two shlokas. One shloka that they sang was about the beauty of Krishna, and one shloka that they sang was about the kindness of Krishna. How Krishna is so kind hearted. Somebody who came actively to kill Krishna, Putana, she put the deadliest poison on her body and tried to kill Krishna. But Krishna neglected the bad part and Krishna took the good part. And Krishna gave the position of a nursemaid, assistant to his mother Yashoda in the spiritual world to Putana. And when this shloka was spoken to Shukdev Goswami just could not control himself and he said, I need to meet this person, I need to find out this person. So, this quality of Krishna, that he neglects our faults and he looks at the good side of ours, attracted somebody who was not ready to come out of the womb of his mother for 13 years. He's such a great sage inside the womb of his mother. He says, I am not willing to come out. Can you imagine what is this amazing quality of Krishna? So in our service to Krishna, in our activities to serve Krishna, to please Krishna, whatever we do, even if there are mistakes, by this one shloka we can understand that Krishna will neglect all our faults, Krishna will neglect all our shortcomings, and he will say, this person tried to serve me. All his life he has been trying to serve somebody else, but now he has been trying to serve me. So most people in their life serve themselves. They're working hard for themselves. A few people out of them will work hard to serve Krishna. And still few more people, they will work hard to please those who are dear to Krishna. As we have always been speaking, Krishna is a person, and because Krishna is a person, Krishna is overwhelmed when somebody does something for him. Just like we in our lives, we may be very big people, but even if a small child comes and does something for us out of his or her own sweet will, then we are overpowered by it. Similarly, all those devotees who are trying to serve Krishna, when they do something for Krishna, Krishna is overpowered by it. So, most people are serving themselves. Some people serve Krishna, and still few more people, they don't even serve Krishna. They serve those who are dear to Lord Krishna. You know why? Because they know in service to those who are dear to Lord Krishna, service to Krishna is already included. When you serve Krishna according to His will, He is pleased. But when you serve Krishna and his devotees as per their will, then Krishna is all the more pleased. So that's a very high standard. But the whole point of this first shloka was that we have to be very active, we have to be very innovative, we have to be very creative and find out newer ways to please Krishna, and higher still, those who are very dear to Lord Krishna. When we serve Srila Prabhupada by distributing his books, whatever extent possible, we can be assured in the pleasure of Srila Prabhupada is the pleasure of Lord Krishna. So that was from 2.11. 2.12, Krishna spoke, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. So the rhyming line for this shloka is, when we accept we are deathless, then there is a chance that we can be fearless. Actually, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is mentioned that fear is something that is created. It comes into picture only when we create a reality which has no God in it. When we create a second reality, which is a godless reality, only in that reality fear exists. Why? Because Krishna represents purity, Krishna represents kindness, Krishna represents dharma. So, in a reality which is an artificial reality where there is no Krishna, then there is no kindness there, then there is no purity there, then there is no dharma there. Today morning, myself and one devotee were talking about a rose bouquet. In one program yesterday, they gave me a rose bouquet. And those roses, today morning we saw they were as fresh as they were on the trees. So I was discussing with my friend here, telling him, all these rose bouquets that are sold in the market, all those roses have so much poison sprayed on them in the form of insecticides and pesticides. Basically, they become spiritual or something. Spirituality means does not have a beginning and does not have an end. Basically, it's eternal. So this rose, in an artificial way, it becomes spiritual. This rose has so many chemicals on it. The petals don't change. Last time somebody gave me a bouquet was 1 week back, and we threw that bouquet just yesterday or day before yesterday, and the petals did not change for 6 days. And we have a garden here at our temple in Baramati, and those rose petals, in the morning, if you don't pluck the rose, by the evening, those petals are gone. The lifespan of the petals is hardly 8 or 9 hours. And here we have roses in bouquets that are lasting for 7 or 8 days. So you can understand how much poison is there. So this kind of artificial reality may be there, but it does not please. Similarly, when we create an artificial reality where God does not exist, then we are scared. Because there's going to be injustice there, there's going to be harshness there, there's going to be adharma there. So, there was this one sannyasi who was traveling, and one time he went to a shop, and then he said, "Can I have some sugar?" And this person gave me sugar. And he said, "Yeah, but I also need some salt." And then he gave him some salt. And then there are so many boxes that were kept in that shop. And then he asked, "Oh, this box contains sugar, this box contains salt. What is there in that box?" And the shopkeeper said, "In that box there is Krishna." So, Krishna, what does it mean? And then he showed the box. And the box at that time was empty. There was nothing in the box. But the shopkeeper had a very amazing way of speaking that the box is empty. The shopkeeper said, "We don't speak that the box is empty. We say that in this box there is Krishna, because Krishna is everywhere. How can God not be someplace?" So in a box where there is nothing, what I am saying is there is nothing visible to my eyes, but Krishna is there in that box. So if Krishna exists in all places at all times, how can we create a reality where God does not exist? And that's why this is the artificial world that we have created in our own lives where God does not exist. And that's why we are constantly scared. That's why we are constantly crying. And that's why we feel we are in danger. Imagine you are in some riot affected city. There's a riot going on. I heard in all the metropolitan cities of India right now there's a curfew from 11 in the night to 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the morning. So imagine there is some riot situation in some city and you are traveling through that city. You'll be scared and you will constantly try to avoid those areas where there's a riot going on. Obviously, on your own, you will never ever come out of your home. But what if there is some medicine to be purchased? What if there is some emergency, health emergency at your home and you need to go out? Imagine you're walking on the streets and you don't know from where some bullet will come, you don't know from where some brick will come, you don't know from where some stone will come and it will hurt you. What can you do about it? All you will do is just look here and there 1,000 times and take each step very carefully. Now I'll give you another scenario. Now imagine that you're in a bulletproof car and sitting in that bulletproof car, you are traveling through the city that is riot affected. You are aware of the danger, but it does not create fear in your heart. You know why? Because you are safe in that bulletproof car. Similarly, the scriptures tell us the body that you are seeing is not you. You are sitting inside the body. And that's why when there are diseases around us, especially in these pandemic times, I came across so many people who were dead scared, who were saying, oh, this pandemic is so. So when we see some disease happening to the body, when we see some disability to the body, have you seen people who become scared? Have you seen people who are really fearful? The extent to which we assume, we accept that we are this visible body, to that extent we'll be fearless, just like this person without any protection is walking around in a riot affected city. He's completely fearful, he's completely scared. But as soon as he sits inside a bulletproof car, then he sees everything, but it does not affect him. Similarly, we are inside this body, although this body, in one sense, is not a bulletproof car. But one thing is sure, I am not this fallible body. I am not this body that is prone to get old. I am not this body which is prone to getting diseased. I am not this body, this Sat, Chit, and Ananda. I am eternal. I am full of knowledge. I am full of happiness. That is my original definition of the spirit soul that is within the body. And especially when we are armed with the knowledge of the Gita, which Lord Krishna himself speaks, then we understand whatever happens to the body. Sometimes some bullets may hit the car, and there may be some impressions or some holes that are created on the car outside, but the bullets will not be allowed to come inside. So actually, when we read the Gita, it's not that immediately our world changes. The world remains the same. It's still a riot affected area. Anytime from anywhere, bullets can come. Anytime from anywhere, some stones can come. If not stones and if not bullets, harsh words, which are more painful than bullets and wounds, will definitely come. But if we are sitting, if we are accepting that I am not the car, I am the passenger in the car, I am not this body, I am the passenger inside the body, then we understand. Well, even if they come, I don't accept it. And because I don't accept it, it will never affect me, it will never hurt me. So it is said, misery is compulsory, but suffering is optional. Misery will be thrown on us, but do you wish to suffer from it? Or do you have a positive alternative to it? That is up to us. Have you seen old people? And sometimes old people look very morose. They look very unhappy. But I can tell you, I have also seen old people who are completely happy, who are completely satisfied, and who are looking forward to every day. Not that they are taking some anti aging pills. No, they are not taking anti aging pills. They have just come up with this perspective that this body is a temporary car that I am sitting in. And if this body is a temporary car that I'm sitting in, I can change my car. So actually, old people, they have so much wisdom. Young people have information. Middle-aged people have some knowledge. But the more you cross 50, 55, 60, you become wise. You become really so amazingly precise in what is going to happen in life. And sometimes young people just keep on wondering, how does my grandfather know everything about everything? Well, it is just experience. So those who are proud, or those who are recognizing their experience, and those who want to share that experience with others, actually old age is a wonderful opportunity to become happy, because so many people can come to you and they can ask you questions about life, and you can share your wisdom with them. But if you don't have that kind of perspective, then you feel, oh, my knees are no longer allowing me to walk. Oh, my eyes are no longer allowing me to see properly. Oh, my ears are not allowing me to hear properly. And that's how we become scared. But if we see our old age, as our body becomes more and more susceptible to diseases, actually, if we don't have a corresponding increase in our wisdom, then old age becomes scary. Otherwise, those who are really knowledgeable, those who are really wise, they become really happy when they get senior in their age and they get an opportunity to share their wisdom with others. It means those of us who are still not considered old, this is a wonderful opportunity for us to read more, to hear more, to practice more, to realize more. And in this way, tomorrow all of us will definitely become old. But when we become old, people will look forward to our association and say, my aunt, my grandmother is so wise. She's so intelligent. She knows so many things about so many things. I want to spend more time with her, learning the art of leading successful life. But if we don't do that today, if we don't take shelter of the Gita today, then when we become old, which we are going to compulsorily, we'll only be really morose and kind of complaining about everything around us. So when we accept we are deathless souls, then we become fearless. Actually, there is a story about how Vidur, he did not take part in the war of Mahabharat, and he went on a pilgrimage. But during the pilgrimage, he learned that Dhritarashtra and all his 100 sons, they they lost the war. The 100 sons of Dhritarashtra were killed, and Dhritarashtra alone is surviving. So Vidur himself is old, and Dhritarashtra is also old. But in that old age, Vidur thought about his old elder brother, and he came back from that pilgrimage knowing that this is a good time to teach Dhritarashtra what is the truth of life. And Vidur, abandoning his pilgrimage in between, came back to Hastinapur, met his elder brother, gave him very strong words of renunciation, and it really worked. And that's how Vidur took care of his brother Dhritarashtra and made him walk on the path of renunciation. He told him, forget it. Your whole life you tried to snatch away everything from the Pandavas and it never worked. Now why are you so attached to it? So that wisdom that Vidur had all his life actually made an impact when he returned back, and he had that fine fine touch to it about his own practices, because he practiced what he knew all his life, and then those words really made a dagger like impact on the heart of his elder brother Dhritarashtra, and it worked. The third concept that we want to share with all of you is 2.13, which says that the spirit soul stays in the body, but the body always keeps on changing. So the rhyming line for this shloka is, change is compulsory of everything in this world. This is the summary. Change is compulsory. Everything, every person, every situation, everything will change. But when that change is not accepted, then what happens is we really become miserable. Actually, whenever some unexpected change happens in our life, either in the case of a person, in the case of a situation, maybe in our own health situation, whatever, but any unexpected change when it happens, I have seen people being in denial. They just don't accept it. Sometimes when some family member suddenly leaves, it takes days for people to accept that one of their own family members has left. There's a lot of denial there. But if we accept 2.13, how change is compulsory and everything in this world, this is the summary, then we are not in a denial, but we adapt to that change. And we learn to live with that change. I was talking to one family, and they lost one son recently, and it's really very sad story, but they lost one young son. And then after talking to them for around half an hour, I asked them, do you have any other child? And they said, yes, we have a younger son. So the child that they lost is in was about to pass the 10th standard, and they have another child who is in 6th standard. And after explaining to them different things, finally I told them, I'll request you something now. If you keep crying in remembrance of the child that you lost, I told them it is also going to create a lot of pain in the life of the child that is still there with you. So imagine this smaller child in 6th standard, and he's looking at his mother and his father, and mother and father are constantly crying, thinking about the son they lost recently. But he's an innocent child. What does he know that he lost his brother? What does he know the pain of a mother and father? He's just looking at mother and father, expecting some affection from mother and father, whereas mother and father are busy crying for their lost son. So I told them one strong reason why you should accept this change is that if you don't accept this change and if you don't really overcome it, if you don't really adapt yourself to it, is you are doing a lot of violence, you are doing a lot of injustice to your younger son who still is there with you and who deserves your love and affection just like your elder son deserved it. And when they heard this perspective, I told them, it was a little difficult for them to accept, but I told them, out of a feeling of service to your younger son, remembering that your younger son also needs a lot of love from you, you must overcome the pain that you are feeling out of the loss of your elder son. And when I spoke that, then it really made sense to them and they understood that I'm not denying them their feelings, I'm not denying them their pain. What I'm telling them is, if they become absorbed in that pain, if they are not willing to accept that change that has been already been done in their life, then it will cause a lot of hardships to themselves also, and it will also cause a lot of hardships to others also. So yes, we don't want certain changes to happen in our life, but somehow our karma catches with us, and there are a lot of things that are forced on us. All we can do is we accept and we grow. So if we really want to grow, then we need to accept this. The next shloka of our discussion is 2.14, and Krishna is saying how seasons keep on changing, and that's why we must learn to tolerate these changes without being disturbed. And the rhyming line for this is, in this world, discomfort is a guarantee, but to set ourselves free, tolerance is the key. Tolerance is very important. It is said we won't always feel motivated. There are these happy moments in our life when we feel really motivated. It may not last forever. And when we don't feel motivated, what will help us is if we are disciplined. When we discipline ourselves, then it compensates for that time when we are not feeling motivated. So it is said there is a pain of regret and there is a pain of discipline. If we don't want the pain of regret, then we have to accept the pain of discipline. And discipline is never for others. Discipline, basically the word discipline begins with yourself. In English, a shishya is called a disciple. The spiritual master has a disciple, and the words disciple and discipline are really very close to each other. So a spiritualist, a disciple, means his life is based on discipline. It's not that everything happens as per his will, but he has disciplined himself to advance and to obey the words of his spiritual master. He has disciplined himself to obey the words of the Supreme Lord. Yesterday in a program, we were discussing how what is different in the lives of great people and ordinary people. The situations are the same, that they go to the same schools, and natural tragedies are also the same for everyone. But what differentiates great people from ordinary people is that great people tolerated what was happening to them. They did not succumb to the pressure. They did not sit down and start crying. They said, no, I have to tolerate what I can't change. And I can positively change. I need to positively change what I can change. So some certain things in our life we can't change, we have to tolerate them. And certain things which we can change, go back to 2.11 and try to change them. So those who feel that the glass is empty are pessimistic. Those who feel that the glass is full, they are actually optimists. And realists are those who say, well, the glass is half empty right now, but it is refillable. We can put water there and we can fill it up. So the optimist comes up with a artificially positive concept which does not exist. And the pessimist comes up with an artificially negative concept which also does not exist. There is some water in the glass. But those who are really very intelligent, they say, right now the glass is half full, but if we pour water in it, it will become full. So these are the people who tolerate the negativities in their life, but they also want to do something to overcome that negativity and make it into positive. So tolerance is not about mute acceptance. Tolerance is not about keeping quiet and just accepting whatever dirt is falling on you. No. Don't become a dustbin. Tolerance is certain things that cannot be changed. You tolerate it and come up with a positive alternative. When you see the glass half full, you come up with an alternative how to make that half full glass completely full. That is tolerance. So, tolerance is two parts. One is see and accept reality, don't live a life of denial, and also how to contribute to the position, contribute to the situation, how to contribute in such a way that tomorrow for others that negativity no longer exists in their life. And then 2.15, the last shloka of our discussion is these are the first five shlokas that Krishna begins with. And Krishna says, O best among men, Arjun, the person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress, tolerant, but and steady in both, is certainly eligible for liberation. So the rhyming line for this is steadiness in duality is rare, can take us to the land of eternal care, and it is beyond all despair. That land, Vaikuntha, the spiritual world, is beyond all misery, is beyond all despair. But to get to that land, according to 2.15, which is the fifth shloka that Krishna is speaking in the beginning of the Gita, see, right there in the beginning of the Gita, he's going to speak so many shlokas, but he's already talking about liberation. He's already talking about going beyond the material world to the spiritual world. So this is Lord Krishna who starts with a big bang. He's starting with a liberation concept. And that's why those of us who are tolerant, those of us who are steady in our duties, in our services, in our sadhana, in whatever duties we have towards Krishna, when we are steady in this constantly unsteady world, actually it is a proof of our sincerity to Krishna. My dear Krishna, look at the world around me. Everything is basically against your instructions. But here I am trying to the best of my limited ability. I need your shelter. I need the shelter. I need the guidance of your devotees. I need to learn the art of being steady in an unsteady world. You have given the example in 5.10 of a water drop on a lotus leaf, always tottering, always unsteady. But I want to pray to you that I want to be really very steady in this unsteady world. And in this way, I want to be eligible for liberation. And I want to come to the land of eternal care beyond all despair. So, a sincere student means he does not demand a favorable environment. He is ready to work hard as per the instructions of the teacher, especially in an environment which is against him. We were talking about some army people 2 days back, and this person was telling his son is in the Air Force. And one of the most difficult things that they teach is that in NDA, he was saying, 8 days they put you in some deep forest somewhere and without any food, without any water, without anything on you. And now you have to figure out how for 8 days you will live in the most dangerous forests. So there is every reason to complain, there is every reason to give up. You eat what you want to eat, you drink water from where you want to drink. In the forest, what are you going to get to eat? So some of them are eating fruit, some of them are eating snakes because sometimes snakes are available in the forest. But that is army life, and only when that kind of training people pass those 8 days in the wilderness, when they pass, then they are inducted into the army. So think at a higher level. We are not talking of short service commission. We are not talking of long service commission. We are talking about the higher levels in the army. So on a day-to-day basis, they will not make you do that. But especially the test is not that you do a drill in the army campus, but you stay for 8 days in a deep forest, surviving on whatever nature gives you. So that is the test of sincerity. In very difficult circumstances, in Sanskrit it is called pratikul and anukul. So in anukul circumstances, we can always stay nice and motivated and happy and encouraged. But in a pratikul circumstance, when we don't have that kind of support from anybody, are we really strong enough that we are not dependent on others' support, but we support others? So when we prove our sincerity to Lord Krishna and to our spiritual master in very tough situations, then we actually become eligible for liberation. Then Krishna says he has undergone his 8 days test, or sometimes in devotee's life it could be an 8 month test, or sometimes in devotee's life it could be an 8 year test. For 8 years there was no support from anybody, but you gave support to somebody. And in this way, when Krishna sees, yes, he did not want a anukul situation, he did not want a favorable situation. Whatever situation was given to him, he tried his best. That is when we really please Krishna, and that is how we become eligible for liberation. So in sixth chapter, I guess the first 5 shlokas, Krishna says, Jitatmanah prashantasya paramatma samahita. So Krishna makes a very amazing statement similar to this statement 2.15. He says somebody who has conquered his mind, jita atmana, जीत लिया उसने अपने मन को जीत लिया, जितात्मनः prashantasya, and he's very calm and quiet and he's undisturbed by the situation. Jitatmanah prashantasya paramatma samahita. He has already contacted the Paramatma. The Paramatma in the heart. Dhruv Maharaj had to do so much tapasya for 6 months, but Krishna is saying, just by being a steady sage, just by being undisturbed in difficult situations, if you can achieve that situation, you have already come close to the Paramatma, Paramatma Samahita. So in this way, these 5 key concepts that begin the Gita, if we can remember and if we can really live by these principles, then I feel rest of the Gita becomes very easy for us. This is like the foundation on which the Gita, rest of the message, the Dhyan Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and all the other chapters are based on. So these are the 5 key concepts that begin the Gita and that form the foundation of the Gita. This is my humble presentation on the occasion of the Gita Jayanti in the year 2020. And I really thank all of you for giving me an opportunity to speak on these 5 key concepts. I'll stop here, and if somebody has any questions, then you can unmute yourself and ask questions. Okay, anybody would like to repeat those rhyming lines, at least one of those rhyming lines that we put on the screen just now? Anyone?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, yes, Mataji.
Those who are wise, 2:11. Can I
Yes,
read?
yes, yes.
Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead. First, 2:11. Okay.
Yeah, but that is the translation. What was the rhyming line that we put?
Ashocha nanvashocastvam padam
I put a rhyming line there. Don't cry till you become dry. Try and try until you catch God's eye.
Yes.
Okay, any other line anybody remembers?
Prabhuji, Hare Krishna.
But one I can definitely try.
Yeah.
All right. One who knows is deathless, then he surely becomes deathless.
Perfect. Yes.
Thank
Anybody else?
Prabhuji, you said change is compulsory of everything in this world. This is the summary.
Yes, thank you. Anything else?
Something about
Okay, just for the
despair.
pleasure. Yes, yes, I'm waiting.
Something about despair also you had put.
Okay, okay, okay. To help all of you, I'll put it for the last time on a screen. Steadiness in duality is rare and take us to the land of eternal care beyond all despair. Okay, thank you so much. Any other comments, suggestions?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, just one comment.
Yeah,
Yeah, remember in school we were taught about that story of a elephant and four blind men.
yeah,
How one says the elephant is like his ears, or like his trunk, or like his tail.
yeah. They have their own
So
limited versions of
they
the
won't
truth.
limit. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I felt that there are many people who approach the Gita blind for a devotion. And that's why they will, take one verse or one chapter and say Gita says this, Gita says that. But one who has devotion, who's really bhakti, he can see and then tell the elephant as he is, or as the Gita is. That's what I wanted to just say.
right. Let the elephant speak.
Yeah, that's
We don't allow Krishna to speak.
yes, yes. That's what I mean, it's common, no? How they are all not wrong, but they are not correct.
Limited
Yeah,
version.
limited. Yeah. So, yeah. So that was
Okay.
one analogy that I wanted to give.
Thank you, thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, can I say something?
Yes, of course.
It is always that example of the glass half filled and half empty is given. But is it not that when the glass is half empty, it means something is not going our way? Is that also not a positivity because we get to learn the lessons of life from it?
See, why things are not going our way? Because maybe our way is not a natural way. The way the world is designed,
Mm-hmm.
the designer's plan will be followed, right? Not
Yeah.
the people who use the product. We have a television at our home, we have a refrigerator at our home. The refrigerator does not work as per our will, the refrigerator works as per the will of the designer.
Mm.
So similarly, this world also has a designer, and this world will work as per his or her plan.
Yes,
Now,
Prabhuji.
when we don't accept it, that is where we feel, oh, things are not going as per my way, but they were never meant to go our way.
Yeah.
The television was always supposed to work the way the designer made the television. Similarly, this world was always designed and expected to work as the way the designer wanted it to happen.
Yeah, Prabhuji, but if I can interrupt, why is it that it is said the glass is empty? As a आपण empty in the sense it is teaching us some lesson, no?
एक्झॅक्टली. पण मग आपण असं का म्हणतोय की थिंग्स आर नॉट गोइंग ॲज पर माय वे? देर इज एन एक्सपेक्टेशन दॅट यू शुड गो ॲज पर माय वे. Anyways, it was not designed that way.
Mm-hmm.
The world was never designed
Okay.
designer's way. And then, yes, because it is going the designer's way, I need to learn from it. I can always learn from it. That's true.
Yeah.
प्रभूजी आपण म्हणतो देवाच्या मनात असंच आहे. ज्या वेळेला आपण म्हणतो नाही असं होणार नव्हतं कारण देवाच्या मनात तसंच आहे. म्हणजे वी हॅव टू ऍक्सेप्ट दॅट.
Yeah, so that's my idea, that the way this world is designed by the designer, that is how this world will function. This world will not function as per what you feel and I feel and what others feel. And when we accept this reality, that the sun is rising not because I want it to rise, the sun is rising because Krishna wants it to rise. The river is flowing not because I want it to flow. I want a dam to be built. I don't want the river to flow, but the river is still flowing. The dams, they cannot stop the river from flowing. Finally, they have to create some outlets for the river to flow, because if they don't create that outlets, then sometimes a dam can be in a dangerous position. Anybody who knows a little bit about dams, they know that if the dams are fully full, it is an extremely dangerous situation. So even after you create a dam, you cannot stop the rivers from flowing. The river has to flow because that's the designer's plan. In fact, when the dam overflows, that's when the greatest floods are created. Last time when there was a big flood in Pandharpur and so much damage happened, it was not because of the flood, it was because the dam water was released. Because it was dangerous for the dam to get full. And that's when maximum time rivers were flowing and we thought that the rivers are creating problem and that's why we created dams. But by creating dams, we have created greater damage. So my point is, whenever we try to go against the plan of the Lord, that is when problems start. That is when things are becoming complicated. Abba Mataji, does that help?
Yes, Prabhuji. In between, I couldn't hear properly. I'm sorry. But yes, definitely. But I'm sorry if I am again keen on saying the same thing, that the negative perspective of the empty glass shouldn't be, always trying to make some impact on the thinking of the person when there are some obstacles in his life, that
Yeah,
might make
yeah,
him up.
both of us are
Yeah.
basically saying the same thing, but I'm saying the negativity is not in the glass, the negativity is in my perspective.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
So
That's
I'm
what
saying, yeah, I'm saying the designer of this world wanted it to be that way. Why am I saying that it is negative? My perspective is negative.
Correct. Yes.
The glass being half, the glass being empty, the glass being full is not negative, is not positive. It is the plan of the Lord.
Yes.
So negativity is in my perception, not in that glass, not in the water there.
Correct.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Let's meet next Thursday for discussion on the last 8 shlokas of the Bhagavad Gita, 8.24 to 8.30. Thank you so much. Jai Shri Shri Radha Gopinath Bhagwan ki Jai, Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda ki Jai.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare
Thank you,
Krishna.
Prabhuji. Thank you,
Hare
Prabhuji.
Krishna.
Prabhuji,
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Prabhuji will put the link on the group about Gita recitation tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll put. As soon as I get the link, I'll put it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Hare
you very
Krishna.
much. Hare